Welcome back to Connect and Transform. We are finishing up and getting towards the end of creating a text comparison tool for the web. What you see on the screen is the text comparison tool comparing on the left the state of the project at the end of the last video, and on the right the state of the project today. By the end of the last video, we already had the three center buttons. We had the download left, download right, and toggling the exact match lines. And we've added some new ones. So we have two new buttons here to choose new files and to swap files. So if I click over here and swap files, you can see that it swaps the files and reassesses the rules and applies new classes and new styling. And if I choose new files, it gets rid of all those elements, clears out all the state, and basically returns us back to the same position as if we had just refreshed the page, and we're free to choose our two files for comparison. And if you look here, I may have done a little bit of CSS around creating these buttons for the future to be able to shift individual lines or entire groups over to the other side. So for example, these four green lines are considered the same group because they were applied by the same rule and they are contiguous to each other. But this green line here is a separate group from these four because they're not contiguous. So the idea is once I implement the line and group shift buttons, you'll be able to shift either individual lines one direction or the other, or shift the current group of whichever line's group button you click. It'll shift that current group over to the other side. And there's no reason to show the buttons when the files are identical, when the lines are identical, such as all of these. So if I hide the exact match lines, you're left with exactly the changes since the end of the last video. Mostly additions with one line of CSS probably having some minor changes, and then there were a few removals. That's probably what that change was. I shifted these styles from JavaScript to CSS. So I'll briefly go over the additions. So it looks like some additions to styling, and then some new HTML elements. And then I have a function here, update file contents for download. So I must have either moved or modified that file because I know we had file downloads working by the end of the last video. And then this is a function that supports choosing new files and resetting the state. So that's for this leftmost button here in the control header. There's a function here to clear lines. So that's a helper assistive function to basically get rid of all the elements on both sides of the screen, which also supports this choose new files control button. And then I have a function here to swap files, which also uses clear lines. So we clear all the contents and then we basically rebuild it when we're swapping files. So that function supports the rightmost button there. And then we see I have a couple of functions stubbed out to copy a group or copy a line, but I've not implemented those, so that'll be for the future. And then some code to instantiate and support underlying state. And then there's a whole section here where basically for every time we're adding a line to one side or the other, we're setting some custom data attributes to keep track of which rule allowed that line to be created, and then storing the literal content rather than the display content. And so I'm anticipating that all these attributes I've added will be used in the future in the copy group and copy line functions, the ones that I've not yet implemented. And then there's a function here to add the actual line buttons. And so as I hover over the lines, that's what's adding these shift line and shift group buttons. So that's what's changed. As for what's left to do, I have to implement the shift line and shift group buttons on both sides. And I'll see if on the right-hand side, you'll notice that as I'm hovering, these two buttons are pushing the content further to the right, I don't really like that. I'll see if I can avoid it, but if I can't do anything about it, it's not that big of a deal. The only other thing I might do is I might add a sixth button on the top header to maybe undo, so that if you click shift line or shift group, might be good to have at least one undo available. But I think we're very close to accomplishing all the objectives I had for this project. We'll probably have just one or two more videos in this series. Thanks for watching.